All right. Well, welcome to the next episode of the Co-Away podcast, which is devoted to the idea that a team of people led by a good owner sharing best practices and a culture built on trust and respect will complete better projects. I'm really thrilled to have COA member and good friend Jim Carroll with the University of California, Davis with us today. Um, Jim, you have one of the most interesting career paths I've heard of. So, in just a few minutes, tell us just a little bit about that path and maybe the what led you to the different stops along the way, and including where you are now.
Will do. Hey, thanks. Well, first of all, really appreciate you inviting me to this. It's great to really talk about COA and the COA way and really see how it connects to all of us here. So, love to share a little bit of my story and go through some question and answers here today. Really looking forward to it. For me, the journey is really related to um, one of trying to remain as wide as possible in my career. So if I look at that, I started out in a very traditional path, undergraduate, graduate studies in architecture. Went to University of Maryland. Was in the Baltimore and DC area for really 25 years in private practice, and greatly enjoyed that. What I found after a while is, of course, it is a highly competitive business. It is something where if you did five of something and you're competing with somebody that did 50 of something, most owners are going to take the person that did 50 of something. Frustrated me a touch. I really liked the idea of being involved in touching all kinds of project types and not just focusing on one or two or even three with a certain amount of expertise. And I really did enjoy the higher ed world. So I had a couple of university architects that I met early in my career, and they made a pretty big impression on me, and it allowed me, I think, to start with a concept of width in my career. So moved to the higher ed side, the owner's side in 2011. Was at Auburn University for 7 years, and then came out here to Davis in 2018, and really had a wonderful time here. It's great to be part of a very large system, which was the reason that I moved out here to really get an idea about what the large footprint research institutions can do.
So, Jim, undoubtedly, many of the people listening to this, whether they're members of COA or not, are owners who, I mean, 95% of owner folks came from the construction world or came from the design world. I'm one of the rarities that came right out of school to be an owner. So, talk a little bit about the transition that you undoubtedly had to get out of designer mindset and switch to client of design
That's
professional.
that's such a great question. It and I spend a bit of time here at Davis trying to share with my peers that move that we all make. A lot of us do come from some trade, some background into this. We're not all very early in our career like you were. And it does take a different mindset. There's a bit of trust involved. There's a bit of large team evaluation and sort of personality and personnel evaluation to go into it. Make sure you can trust somebody. We all do so many projects that you got to go in quick. You have to form your opinions quick. You have to form your methodology of how you're going to connect with somebody. But in the end, on the owner's side, you kind of have to sit your architect of record, engineer, carpenter trade expertise. You kind of have to sit that out there and let these people that you've hired do these great things for you. The benefit that you offer the team is experience from many different perspectives. So I think the challenge then is how much do you offer that input and how much do you observe and see if they're going down the right way anyway, in your opinion. So as the owner, we kind of have to take charge, but at the same time, I think we have to respect our own backgrounds. So it's a careful balancing act for all of us that do this.
Yeah, no doubt. Um, Thinking about some of the stuff that you and Lucy and the California chapter have worked on, especially that three-part series last year, Jim, that was pretty intensely focused on workforce, talent retention, recruitment, et cetera. Talk a little bit about, because it's on everyone's mind today in just about every industry, just for UC Davis and maybe specifically your department at UC Davis. What are you all doing to try to make sure that you recruit and maybe even harder retain good talent? Are some specific ideas you could offer to other folks?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we've honestly had to make this change in our region. So Northern California, Davis sits about 15 miles west of Sacramento. So we're right in the middle of Northern California between the state capital and then, of course, everything in the Bay Area, whether it's the technology hubs or just the sort of black hole that is the workforce in San Francisco. I mean, there's so many people that go there that it's easy for us to be magnetized out to that area, and it's very challenging. So one of the things that we've done recently is we've decided that we're going to put a lot of responsibility on our senior folks here within our organization, and we're going to rely on their experience to assist some emerging professionals in coming in and trying to get some folks maybe earlier in their career to join us. And it doesn't happen a lot for people moving over to the owner's side. You know, a lot of people do it a little bit later in their career, but it's helped us quite a bit to get people that are maybe not the project manager level 5 folks in our structure, but maybe the 2, 3s, and 4s that come in, and they can help for a minute. They can learn their way through some really good senior managers here, and then we can sort of set the breadcrumbs up so they can follow that trail, and grow their career here on campus. And so far, it's worked fairly well. You're always at a little bit of risk when you bring people in a little bit earlier in their career. They have a tendency to look and wander, and I think that's a positive thing. I mean, you have to find the place where you're comfortable. But if we can make them comfortable and realize that we offer a little bit of balance on the owner side and not quite so much go, go, go like the commercial side, we might be able to keep some people for a few years. And it's so far it's been good.
Yeah, and I would think, I don't know, but I would guess, because we're actually having a discussion about this internally for future COA staff additions. The idea of getting younger folks in your vernacular, the PM 2, 3, maybe even 1 level. Yeah, there's downside, but the upside would be malleability. They're not jaded. They're or kind of stuck in some certain way. You can kind of mold them and teach them the UC Davis way, I would think.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the experienced professionals are going to bring exactly that. I mean, a ton of projects they've already done, and more often than not, I hear, "Oh, we're going to do it this way because that's how I've seen success." And those emerging professionals, I think, are really bringing a bit more of a positive. Hey, how do we do this? How about if we do it this way? And we get lots of good ideas from everybody with regard to that. I mean, we've got at any time 150 projects that are in our queue, and we need creative ideas on how to solve these. There's not one answer.
No doubt. Yeah. Um, so kind of a transition, kind of not, because it relates to what we were just talking about, Jim. The word that is in my head right now, that's on a lot of people's minds, is culture. Um, and I'm talking within your organization, but also within each of your project teams. You and I both know that, like it or not, every project team, small or large, has its own kind of unique DNA and chemistry, and the culture of that team, hopefully led by the good owner, is important. Talk about culture within your department, maybe within all of UC Davis, and then within your project teams, and what you guys do to try to make that a positive, forward-thinking sort of culture.
Sure, culture, it can be defined at the institutional level, right? You can have a top-down culture at one particular university, and then another you can have a very divided kind of siloed culture, right? You can have multiple units that are sort of connecting in. You might be challenged to go across those silos. Davis is very collegial. I mean, across the campus. So the way things are done, it's done in a very open, transparent way. It can be challenging that way because you're getting into a lot of opinions on things. You're taking a lot of time to glean that information, but we truly feel that it's valuable in doing that. We have a lot of professionals that are doing certain things that are not really within our strike zone. So on the design and construction side and the capital planning side and the real estate, that's what we do at DCM. but our peers on campus are managing operations and grounds and campus planning and safety services and environmental health and environmental planning, all that stuff. We have to feed all that stuff in. So that's the collegial part. That's the positive thing. When it gets down to the department level, um, our constituents on campus want consistency. And you can't get consistency out of project managers because project managers are humans, right? So everybody's going to approach things in a slightly different way. And we want to embrace that. So I'm a big fan of developing new tools for my team. So it's a constant growing of the toolkit and going back and making sure that every day the saw is as sharp as possible so we can sort of get through that process as quickly as possible. And that is a lot of fun for me because I have a background in process management. I did that a lot on the professional practice side, and I think it helps a lot to be able to give those professionals room to do their craft and just give them the sharpest tool we can possibly give them. So that's the culture that I have here at DCM. It is really just if there is a consistent culture across it, it's one of support and leadership that is really offering options and opportunities to them. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have my you will do this kind of absolutes occasionally, but the toolkit is ever growing, and I find that to be pretty important because there's a lot of demands in a collegial and somewhat siloed institution like this is.
Yeah, fabulous response, Jim. And early on in that response, you said something that made me smile. Thinking about our mutual friend within COA, Jack Muma, formerly of Michigan State, now with the University of Maryland, Baltimore, who said 15 years ago, he had all kinds of good little quotes, and one was collaboration is messy, and I think you know what he means. And I not sure I did at the time, but I came to understand if you do it right, back to your point about lots of opinions, and that's kind of the art of being the owner, right? Well, that's hard. It's not, you can say, oh, we're going to collaborate, but doing it right is not easy. And I think
Right.
sometimes people aren't aware of that. So anyway, that's what kind of really
That's great.
resonated.
Yeah, that's terrific too. And Jack's exactly right. I mean, it's so easy to get a solution, just kind of move right down the end of it and get it done. That's one way of doing it. That doesn't necessarily create, though, a community that's rich across the board for everybody.
Right. Exactly. All right. So kind of again, a little bit of an offshoot in a way of culture, but it's one thing to have great culture when everything's happy and yeah, we're busy and we have project issues, but when stuff happens, like the bumper sticker used to say, and there's problems, whether it's internal process, personalities, project specific issues, and there's tension. I'm always curious to hear from successful folks like you. What is your style? What is Jim Carroll's style for handling those tense or other words like that situation? Mine, for example, and it doesn't always work well. In fact, sometimes it doesn't work at all. But my go-to is usually humor. That's
Yeah.
just how I with it, whether in the family unit, at work, whatever. That's kind of my go-to, and it backfires sometimes. What do you do to handle those tense moments?
I think there's a couple of things that happen, when the tense moment sort of makes itself visible. I think you've got an instantaneous reaction. I like the idea of a little bit of humor. It tends to just soften the mood a little bit. I will occasionally go there as well too. When it's a fairly tough situation, though, I do think you need a fast message. And what I really rely on, honestly, longer term is transparency. So it's a lot like I view it a lot like, and I was never a big wrestler but in the high school and college wrestling, you'll see when things get tense and a wrestler thinks they're about to be flipped, what do? They go wide, right? So they stretch out, and that's what I try to do. Is I try to get to as many of my leaders as I can. Say, here's our problem, here's the issue we're trying to solve, and be as transparent as I can with everybody. Now, if it's a little bit discreet, and I can't do that, I've got maybe a separate group that I can go to that's maybe a slightly different unit. than my unit within DCM. You have to understand where those experts are that you can go to when the going gets particularly tough. But living through a pandemic and some of the news that we had and some of the things we needed to respond to, it always helps me to swiftly get an idea about what the situation is and then sort of stretch out with transparency as much as I can. Get to the experts, get to the other opinions. I'm not going to solve this thing on my own. That's really not what the intent of this stuff is. And having some individual genius that sits off in a room and solves problems is not real in a campus community. I mean, there's way too many things to consider. So I've found it really good to become as transparent as possible with these things. We've had a lot of good examples of that over the last couple of years, as we all know.
Yeah, man, I love several things about that. I don't know anything about wrestling, but the visual of getting wide, that resonates. But also they're embedded in your response, Jim, which is not surprising. There's a level of humility there, which is to say, I'm pretty experienced, I'm pretty smart, but I can't solve everything. Let me tap some other smart and experienced people and get them to buy in and take part ownership. That's not everyone's not like that. Not everyone is that humble. So good on you, man, and not surprised by that. Any other thinking about especially emerging professionals, folks newer to the industry, even if they're not so young? Any other parting? Just man, if my older self could have told my younger self this, any lessons like that to share?
That's funny. I started off. I was fortunate. I had a very good friend whose father was an architect. I had pretty good examples of seeing things. I thought it was kind of a cool thing. I thought back then most of architecture was somebody's house, which was interesting. A little bit of upbringing on that from my parents too. But I do think what you get from your surroundings early on, I hope people keep their eyes open. And this is a very individual thing. I don't necessarily think it's always on your parents and always on your teachers to get this, but I hope as kids get into being 15, 17, 18 years old, they keep their eyes open in things that they think they could really enjoy. I've always tried to get my kids to make sure that whatever you do, you like, and you like going to work, you enjoy that time frame. Work can always be tedious. I think we all know that. But the bigger opportunity though is doing something that you really love. We talked about this a lot in the California chapter. Workforce is don't be afraid to work with your hands. If you like that as a kid, continue that. It's okay to be an electrician. It's great to be a plumber. You don't have to get a college degree if that's not what you want. But do things that make you happy. I mean, if you continue to do that, you will do fairly well in work, and I think in life. I think you find a lot of balance that way.
Beautiful. We gotta condense that and frame it or something loose. That's
Sorry, I was rambling there a minute.
no, man.
I think you can. It's do what you like, and the rest will follow. You'll lead a good life. It's pretty
Yeah,
succinct there. Yeah,
and
it's
friendly
great
amendment to that,
advice.
Jim, which I'm sure you agree with. Man, if you can find something that you like and are at least reasonably good at, you got it. There's the secret right there, man.
I
Do
mean,
it.
even if you're not necessarily the best at it when you begin, if you keep at it, it will, and you enjoy it. You'll eventually become the expert. That Maxwell Gladwell thing, right? You do it enough
Yeah.
times to become an expert. So yeah, just do what you like. Keep doing it, and eventually you'll become that expert, and people will pay you for it.
My wife loves giving me a hard time. She'll see me go to a job site or something like that, and she says, "You don't have a real job." And it's funny because I know what she means, and what she's really saying is that I know you really like what you do, and I think that's positive. I mean, thankfully, she said that when our kids were young too, and they got it, they understood it. That yeah, sure, it's a real job, but if you really do enjoy it, it's a lot of fun.
Exactly.
Well, that shines through, man. Even with us 3,000 miles away from you, it's pretty evident. Thanks, Jim, for everything, for your involvement with COA, but for taking some time today to talk with us.
Absolutely, my pleasure.